There are no shortcuts to getting highly coveted press coverage for your brand, only smart cuts like the DIY PR project. Learn how to grow your brand's credibility with PR on a budget with me by your side. This program is your all-in-one membership with expert training, customizable templates, and a supportive community to cheer you on every step of the way. Join us and start growing your business with free publicity today. Sign up now at diy-pr.com. Welcome back to Grow Your Wealth. I'm your host, Rena Goodwin, and today we're talking about reinvention, resilience, and finding balance in the chaos of entrepreneurship. Joining me is Megan Hines, a wellness coach, entrepreneur, and mom who has built a career around helping ambitious women recover from burnout and reclaim their energy. In this episode, Megan shares her transformative journey from a career in molecular biology and teaching to become the owner of a juice bar and brewery, and now the founder of the Hines Collective. Megan opens up about the challenges of balancing business and family, the importance of self-care, and the mindset shifts that helped her reinvent herself time and time again. We also explore her passion for wellness coaching and the practical strategies for finding joy and balance while pursuing your ambitions you just can't miss. So, whether you're an entrepreneur on the edge of burnout or simply looking for that inspiration to make a big change in your life to reinvent yourself or your career, this conversation with Megan will leave you energized. Let's dive in. Megan, welcome to the Grow Your Wealth podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It is a pleasure. Megan, you have worked in many different fields in your career, starting in molecular biology. You've been a teacher, running a juice bar. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey of where you started and where you're heading with your now new career shift as well?
Yes, I feel like it sounds different, but when you kind of dissect who I am a little bit, it makes more sense. So I live in Maryland, right by the coast near Ocean City. So grew up by the beach. My dad was a fisherman. And as I grew up, I'm like, okay, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I was like, I'm going to study science. I actually thought I was going to be a dolphin trainer. Just like everyone else going into any sort of marine biology program. I was like, yes, I'm going to be a dolphin trainer. And so as you start to study, you're like, there's no growth in that. And like everyone makes very little money, a lot of competition. And I was like, okay, like where can we go from here? So I ended up in a grad school program for PhD studying molecular biology, all the way in Colorado, far from home. And I loved it at first. I loved the science. However, over time, I realized I don't want to do this for a career. So I didn't want to be stuck in a lab. I didn't want to have to apply for grants. And I learned really quickly, like I need to shift. I decided to move back home and ultimately use my science degree and teach science in a high school setting. So similar to what I was doing, just I taught AP Bio in a high school. And I thought I was going to be there for 30 years, get my pension, retire. Like that was what I intended. And then COVID happened, right? So a whole parameter shift, everything just changed. And not only did our demands change in the profession, but how I started to think about life. I was like, I can't continue showing up as what these kids need from me. So we pivoted. Like this was a big pivot to go from, that was the COVID word, right? So we pivoted to go from being in a school and going to be an entrepreneur and opening our own business. So that was a few years ago now, and the business is running strong. But yeah, you'll find out a little more. But again, we're pivoting and changing priorities.
That makes a lot of sense. And you started a brick and mortar business though during this time period as well too, which was really, it was only a few years ago, right? But it sounds daring, but still going strong, which is fantastic. Tell us a little bit about, is it June and Juice?
Yes. Yeah. We pronounce it June and Juice. June is a kombucha that's made with honey, and then we make cold pressed juice. So several of the health food options, we also make smoothies and acai bowls, and it's a small carry out. We're in what used to be America's coolest small town in 2014. We're still holding on to that, 10 years later, but it's a cool town with a lot of really niche businesses. So we have done well and continued to grow.
That's amazing. What kind of inspired the inception of that business? It's a little bit of a departure, but that being said, is still related to who you are as a person. Has wellness been always very important to you?
Yes, yes and no. So when I was growing up, I wasn't really given that emphasis from my parents, from role models, so I stumbled on it on my own. But during COVID, going back to that, I have two little kids. And ultimately, we were like, how do we get them to eat vegetables? Like, we want everyone to be healthy. We want to keep our immune system strong, but like, they won't eat vegetables. So what do we do? And so we actually started juicing at home. And so that spawned the inception. We don't have any other juice bars around here as of right now. So we're trying to fill this void. And so we're like, okay, we're doing this. We have some really good recipes. Let's take this to our town and really make something good here.
That's amazing. And congrats on your success thus far. Nevertheless, you had mentioned that you're actually in the process of selling the business and shifting into the Hines Collective. Could you talk to us about this new chapter in your life? What inspired you to make this transition? And how do you envision this going forward?
Sure. So our goal is by the end of the year to have sold the business and to be launching the Heinz Collective in 2025 in the beginning. We're hopefully, if all goes well, that will be the plan. During my I guess just time with customers. Like, as I'm interacting with these customers, I realized the parts that I liked of our business and the parts that I didn't like. I didn't like making necessarily the orders like, oh, they come in and I make it and I hand it to them and then they go on their way. That wasn't the part that lit me up and was inspiring. So ultimately what I found that I loved was the connection. So they would come in and they would have whatever issue or focus that they wanted, and I could actually really help them make tangible improvements to their health and wellness routines. And I was like, this is exciting. So of course, with my science background, I dive in. I really wanted to understand the why and how I could help people. So like, I have someone that came in with like a liver dysfunction, and I was like, oh, like, let me learn all about liver and what kind of foods support that. And so it was a lot of research and trial and error with our ingredients, but I was able to like really support whatever they asked. A lot of people want to come in for immune support, or they need more vegetables or whatever. And I was able to really meet their needs. And that was exciting for me. So with the Heinz Collective, where that is going, it's more of a wellness coaching where I can help people more targeted. I know our juice bar is limited. We only have so much space. We're actually in a tiny, like micro, under 500 square feet juice bar. So I can only do so much. There's no protein. I want to give someone really the tools to live a full life, not just, oh, sell this juice. This is what I need you to have so I can make money. So it needs to go beyond that.
That makes a lot of sense. Certainly, juice makes you feel good, but it sounds like you're really trying to address more of that root cause with people, just in terms of their own personal wellness, and helping ambitious women in business. So let's kind of take the conversation in that direction as well, too. So tell us a little bit about the Heinz Collective in and of itself. I know there's a lot of different like wellness coaching businesses out there. What, in addition to your background, obviously, what made you decide to go in this direction? Why do you think that what you have to offer is so, so important, especially right now for women business owners?
Absolutely. So the reason it's called the collective is it's not just one thing. So you could absolutely have a health coach or a fitness coach. And I have worked with them in the past, and I think that they're fabulous at their craft. However, I think you really need the whole picture to really see improvement. And so I kind of go with a trifecta. That's why I'm working specifically with these ambitious women. Wellness, but it includes three main things. So there's the nutrition piece, like the health piece. There's also mindset, because that was my biggest barrier. It's like, okay, but I'm eating healthy, like I'm surrounded by produce, but like I can't get to that other side. And so that mindset piece is important. And then the third piece is having systems. So kind of in a business coaching sense, having systems and procedures and the just the daily things and habits that you are doing. And so this trifecta between all three, I think, really balances wellness the best. It's not just focused on one component of that.
Absolutely. I read a stat the other day that I think it was like every day 850 new businesses are being started by women. And many of these women are mothers like you and I, right? Where they're balancing business, they're balancing their families, their own well-being gets kind of pushed. How have you seen burnout affect not just yourself, but the people in your orbit as well? I mean, this is really a pretty sad state of affairs, right? We get into business because we want these things like freedom and flexibility, and suddenly we've left our 9 to 5s for 24/7.
Yeah, that describes it perfectly because that's what I did. I worked as a teacher. You're like, oh yeah, you work on the weekends, cool. But like I work every single day now, and so I understand that balance was the goal, that time freedom. And as a small business entrepreneur, you're not necessarily going for the financial freedom piece, but that flexibility and that time was really important to me. And it got swept under the rug because bills got to be paid and like that people are always needing something. And so that really relates to mothers in general or women in general. Like we feel like we need to take it all on and take care of everyone else and ultimately put our needs last. And so as a business owner, you want your customers to be first. As a mom, I want, my kids to be happy, healthy, and safe. And it's really hard to balance all of that when you also need to essentially put your oxygen mask on first, take care of yourself, and so you can show up really well for everyone else.
You also have this really cool free guide called the 6 Step Strategy to Thrive Beyond Burnout. Could you tell us a little bit about this? It sounds like it was influenced by personal experience as well, too.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where this coaching program came from is like, I made all these mistakes. Let me cut all of that time out for you so you can actually get results like way quicker than I did. Thrive, I actually made it into an acronym because going back to teaching, like everything needs to have an acronym and make sense and be teachable and memorable. So let me break down what Thrive is. And then in the guide, what I do is go into more depth and explain how to do that. So Thrive encompasses that trifecta that I mentioned earlier, but it's like more specific steps. So Thrive stands for T is transform your energy. H is health first. So going for a foundation of health. R is real success sustainably. So that sustainable part is key because yes, we want success, but we don't want to burn out along the way. I is integrate peak performance strategies. I'll go into what these are just a little bit more in depth, what that means by peak performance. V is valuing your time. And E is elevating your life and business. So that's kind of the ultimate goal is like to get better. And so kind of looping this back, like the progress is understanding the root cause. That's the T is like, how do I get there? And how do I have that mindset that change is possible? So starting with just the belief that there's a better way and then really targeting health, because if you're not feeling good, you are not able to do anything. And so you might kind of slug through your days, but if you have that foundation, you are able to do a lot more. And then the next one is real success and being sustainable. So having very specific strategies and systems in place to have that balance. I think it's not always perfect balance, but aiming for balance in life. And so then the last three are more like elevated, more advanced strategies. So using whether it's biohacking or looking at your gut health or hormones, like everyone really needs to target something different, but having those advanced strategies in your toolbox as well. Valuing your time, meaning like learning how to say no, learning boundaries. So that's more on the business system side. But I think it's really critical for us to learn and to realize that we're allowed to have that. And lastly, elevating. So taking all these things and putting them together. The goal is not to give you more things to do. Like no one needs more things to add on to their list, but how do we really integrate this seamlessly to make your life everything fulfilling, joyful, like all of the things we want and make it easy. Like without adding more work, we want to actually make it easier. So how do we do that?
My gosh, 110%. And that guide will be on your website. Is that right? The HinesCollective.com.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Okay, incredible. So everyone rush out and get that. I will definitely be downloading that myself too, Megan, because I think it's just so important to not just we talk a lot about burnout and just the purpose of this podcast, right, is not just to talk about it, but sharing those actionable steps, sharing those stories that we're not alone, right? And you had mentioned that, like all of us, you made some mistakes in the past that led to that burnout. Do you have a story around that you can share? Were there an occasion or two that you thought, oh my gosh, something has got to change. I cannot keep doing this, even if you can, right? Because a lot of us can keep doing it, but for the sake of our family, our mental health, our physical health, did you have a moment like that?
There have been a lot of little moments, but I'll tell you the little moments and then I'll tell you the bigger moments.
All
So
right.
there were a lot of little things. So like I would find myself scrolling on my phone, like procrastinating to go into work. I would find myself like dreading and really hating like the Sunday scaries, right? So like
Yeah.
hating that work was coming up. I noticed like I would be wearing all black, like almost like in mourning that I have to go to work and that was my uniform was all black. Like so there were a lot of little things that now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that was a clear sign. But there was one moment, and it happened around my daughter, and it was just like this one moment. I was like, okay, like something's got to give, and so it actually happened this past summer, and it was part of why I'm changing my focus right now. She had come home from school. I guess it was this spring. She had come home from school, and she said, "Mommy." She's looking at me, just like intensely gazing at me. And she's saying, "Mommy, I just forgot what you looked like." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, you've been working so much. You're always gone on the weekends. Like you work into the evening or, and she didn't say this, but like I'm checked out and I just forgot what you looked like." And it broke my heart because she's sick. She's able to articulate how she feels, but she's young enough to like not know that, I'm trying to do better, like all these excuses that I was telling myself. And I was like, oh, like she's just really telling me the truth. And my heart broke because I was like, that's you and my son, you are what's most important. And I am giving up my weekends and I am, always feeling like I'm working. I never feel like I can relax. And that was just a shift. And so from there, we had a couple other events happen. Just back to back to back. But that was the catalyst. And so ultimately I was like, yeah, we're going to step back. We're going to kind of change our priorities and shift and be home more with our family. Yeah.
That must have been so hard to hear. I have two young daughters too, a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I work from home. So they see mommy work and it's tough, right? You want our kids to grow up seeing strong, capable women, right? But at the same time, we have to stop and ask ourselves like, okay, I'm doing this for my kids, right? I'm doing this for myself, but at what expense of that missing out on this time that I so badly want to be spending with them as well too. And um, I think that turbulent feeling is especially difficult for women, right? Because we are the caretakers, we are the providers, and nobody wants that choice of like either or, but how can I have both and have it both feel more balanced? So to back to your point about we all strive for balance, but it's never going to be 50-50, right?
Yeah. In a perfect world, but yeah, we live in today's society. That's not realistic.
Exactly. So all that to say, I really feel for you there, and I grew up in a very similar type of household where my parents own a restaurant, so like they had to physically leave the house. They were gone at crazy hours, nights, weekends, etc. And yeah, it's definitely tough to be physically away and in a physically demanding job away from your kids too. So thank you for sharing that story because I'm sure it was hard to hear. And if anything, it sounds like what you've got planning up ahead will not just impact your family positively, but the lives of so many women as well too, who need to hear this message as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit here. So what are some of these like practical first steps? So maybe not we're talking to like some of the women and maybe even men out there who let's say they don't have children yet or they are just trying to balance their own kind of vision and expectations of them own selves, right? And I hear so much out there in the world, especially on social media, right? Where like to have success, especially in business, it just comes down to like working harder all the time, right? Like, well, you probably just need to put in more hours, churn out more content, spend more on marketing, whatever that looks like. Are there, bits of wisdom or advice that you can share with people about, how to work smarter, not necessarily harder in your life, in your business that you've learned along the way?
Sure. So I always go back to this idea of health first. And we took a trip this past weekend and we checked out Sunday through Tuesday. We actually spent election day underground. I voted early, but election day we went out into the caverns of Virginia, and so we spent time reflecting and totally checked out of everything. My business was covered. We had someone there manning it, and so I knew that I could check out. But all I did was I drank water and I focused on eating and resting. And so those are the things like at the very baseline of what we have to do. We have to take care of our health. And so for me, that's drinking plenty of water. I have to have 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Like that is the minimum. And then I have to like fuel myself correctly. So like eating the right amount of protein, eating vegetables. For me, it's a little easier because I just grab a juice and I have those vegetables. But having like putting systems in your life that make it easy. So whether that's like a meal prep kit that gets delivered to your house or deliveries of groceries, like whatever, or having like a certain set some way that you know that your fuel is getting there. So like that's the baseline, taking care of your health and coming in with a fueled, that's the best word I can think of, a fueled perspective, because then everything else becomes a lot more easy. But actually, as I reflective this weekend, like I in the back of my mind was thinking about all of the things. So I may have taken 3 days off, but I actually came in very energized and had the ideas, and it was so much easier to put those things in place. So it's not work harder, work late hours, because my brain, it just fizzles out. Like I can't do it anymore. So I really do need that rest time to come in and be re-energized. So I have the bandwidth to do it.
For sure. I couldn't agree more. And I'm so guilty of not getting enough of that rest time sometimes. But that white space is so important, especially for those of us that are so busy, like doing, fixing problems, right? Like we never get just when we say time to ourselves, time for ourselves. And, I really look at it as like, an investment in our health, but also an investment in our businesses as well too, because for a lot of entrepreneurs, they need that white space to be able to just think to themselves about, the next step, whatever their vision is for their company, a new product innovation, anything that looks like. And while we're, stuck on screens and, seeing what everybody else is doing, right? It kind of steals some of that creativity. So, it doesn't shock me at all that just sort of having that time offline, literally underground, which is pretty spectacular. Literally underground, having that time for yourself. Did you have any I don't want to call it epiphanies, but did that time in addition to energy bring you some good ideas for the new year?
Yes, and I brought my journal with me, and when they came to me, usually like in the shower or we did a hike. So like on our hike, and I made sure to write them down. But I promised myself I wasn't going to explore it then. Like so, then when I came back Wednesday, I went through and I explored it again and dove deep. So it was more of a I was thinking about social media and really focusing in on, we haven't announced publicly that we are selling. So like, how do we start to hint to people that we are transitioning? And that was the back of my mind focus. And yeah, that made it really clear when I came back.
That's really cool. So selling a business, I mean, that is not something that a lot of people do, right? Like especially here in the United States, there's those really important 5 and 10 year markers in business, right? And for most businesses that aren't there 5, 10 years later, sadly, it's because they went out of business. And here you are, which is a fantastic place to be to choose to sell your business. For so many of us, our business is not just our livelihood, it's a piece of us as well too. Was it really hard to come to this conclusion? I know other than, from a personal standpoint, you felt like you have to. But how do you kind of detach that, like, okay, this is not my baby, or even if it is my baby, right? Like I'm finding a new place for it. Like how are you letting go?
Yeah, you're right. It was almost like grief, like losing something. My identity was rooted really strongly in my business. I actually started it with my husband, and he and I are both working in it full time. So when I opened, and this is a fault of mine, like I was like, oh yeah, I can do this all myself. Like I'm not going to have any employees. Like it'll be just me and him, and we'll have this business. And so, um, that was very unrealistic. But ultimately, I started taking employees on and training them, and um, integrating my identity into how I train them, how our messaging is with how we talk to customers and so on, down to I created our logo and I created our social media. Like all that messaging was very deeply rooted in our story. Like our kids needed vegetables, so we started this business, and we were there every single day almost. So people started seeing us, and so one of the very specific things we've done this summer is distance ourselves physically. So we are still doing our tasks. Everything is getting done, but we are not necessarily the face of the business right now. Our manager is there Monday through Friday. We've got other staff in there that instead of me, like I have delegated that out, so I can be doing other things. It comes at a price. Like I have to figure out, do I pay these people or do I do this myself to save costs? Like that is a big consideration. But as I have kind of stepped back, people don't expect me to be there. And so they don't link me and my face with who our business is. And I think that was a big first step. But also starting to share other parts of it, like just being honest with people of like, well, this is what, this is hard because of whatever we have experienced. So like we will show on our social media, like us lifting compost. So after you juice, you have all the dry pulp. And so like, this is the literal dirty work. Like here we're lifting compost and taking it to a farm. Or we have, at the end of the day, we have all these jars. We do a jar return program and we'll wash them and reuse them. But people bring in jars and they're like moldy sometimes, and they're smelly, and like they leave the juice. Like this is dirty, and just like kind of sharing the less glamorous parts to get them to understand that like life's not all unicorns and rainbows. Like there are other parts of it too.
Ooh, I think that's so, so wise. Obviously from like a content perspective, working in PR, I'm like, that's the stuff people love to see, right? Because they probably walk in, beautiful juice bar, beautiful juices, but like all the quote unquote dirty work that goes into creating something so spectacular and so good for you as well too. Megan, for people out there who are listening who are, in business, about to start a business, they're just at this turning point in their lives where they're like, I need a reinvention. I want to start something new. I want to be something new, whatever that might look like for them. How do they get started? I know mindset holds people back quite a bit. This is your space. How do you talk to people like in this position?
So there's two pieces I think that are important. So there's the tangible strategy and like how do you get started,
Mhm.
but addressing that mindset piece, you could say that we have reinvented ourselves and we've gone through different iterations over and over. And there's more beyond the story. We've had a farm, we've had a brewery, we've had a bunch of different things along the way. And so you could look at that and be like, yeah, they failed, they shut down, they didn't continue it, that business was closed, etc. Or she couldn't make Like I actually quit teaching after 7 years. Like, oh, she couldn't hang, she couldn't keep teaching. And so you could look at that as a failure. But I kind of think about it as I have to figure it out. I have to go through these iterations to figure out what I actually want. So it's not necessarily a failure. It's just my lily pads on the way to success and figuring out what is perfect. So that's the mindset piece, is like whatever you're changing, it's okay to change your mind. The strategy, a little more specific on how. For all of these things, we didn't just like, oh, I have a really good idea, I'm going to go start the licensing and I'm going to open up in 6 weeks or whatever. We kind of dipped our toes into it a little bit. So with the farming, like I had grown up farming. So I had that. And so we started just giving our extras away. When we actually had a meadery. So it's alcohol made from honey, which is similar to a brewery. So we were home brewing and just giving our things away. And along that road, like people liked it. And so it's kind of taking a hobby, growing it a little bit. Same thing with the juice, like growing it a little bit and just seeing if there's a demand. That's the first step, is just like, is this something I could see myself doing? A little bit of market research, like, is there a need for it? It's very different if it's brick and mortar, you're looking within your immediate area, compared to if you are online, that's very different. Trying to figure that out. But whatever your industry is, like, is there a need for it? Is there a place in the space for you? So there's more strategy there, but ultimately, I would say I wouldn't jump right into it. I would kind of like dip a toe into it, nudge into it, and see if it makes sense before leaving whatever you are doing. So like before we left our teaching jobs, we had dipped our toes into the juice bar. And as we got confidence, then we could step back.
I think that's such smart advice, because it's so tempting, again, in a world where we see highlight reels for everyone, right? Like, oh, they just, on the surface looks like that they just flipped a switch, changed their mind, easy breezy, and decided to start this new business. But we rarely see, the muck, the compost, right? Like whether it be in our minds or, literal. But that being said, it can be really scary reinventing yourself. I remember when I went through it about 8 years ago when I started my business, it was a side hustle. And it was like that for 2 years, right? Where it's like I'm still experimenting with it, and decided to take the leap eventually after I had some data. There's nothing wrong with trying things and seeing, like, is there, first of all, do I like doing this, right? Because it's one thing to say like, oh, that looks great. And then it's another thing to actually do the darn thing and enjoy doing it, and then make money doing it as well, which goes into that like product market fit. Do people want this? Is this desirable? Is it something that I can, charge for accordingly? And even then, right? Like for so many entrepreneurs as well too, we're all kind of guilty of, the next best thing. We're always looking for that like next jump forward. And I love the way that you put it with the lily pads, right? There's no shame in the game of trying something new, and for whatever reasons it's not lighting you up, it's not financially feasible for you anymore, you're not seeing your kids as much, it's okay to walk away.
Yeah, that's, I think, really hard for people. I grew up, my mom worked at the same place for 44 years. Like, that is what that generation did. And it's really hard to see that safety and security net of whatever you're leaving. It's familiar, it's comfortable. And yet, if we break through the wall and go to what's on the other side, like that might be amazing, but we don't know. It's scary. Like, it's the unknown. So we're just not ready to do it. But I would argue that even if it is whatever quote unquote failure, just figuring it out and knowing is so much better than living with regret. And at the end of the day and being like, yeah, I should have done that, but I never did.
So wise, so wise. Megan, this has been so inspiring for me. Could you tell us a little bit more about where people can find you?
Absolutely. So I am working on growing my socials. It's at the Hines Collective. That's both Instagram and Facebook. I won't be on TikTok doing any dances anytime soon. I haven't figured out that platform. But right now, Instagram and Facebook. I also sent you my link to that guide on how to thrive beyond burnout. So very specific strategies. And that would be a good place for someone to start as well. Like, where do I get started? This feels overwhelming. Very simple place to start.
That's great. Those will be linked in the show notes as well too. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with today? Any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I would say just in general, like, whew, we can do anything that we put our mind to. And so just having that belief that anything is possible. Yeah, I would leave people with that and just believing in themselves.
That's amazing. Megan, thank you so much. It was such an honor and wishing you all the best with the Hines Collective. Happy 2025.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode deposited some useful advice and insights to help you grow your wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future conversations. You can find more resources, episode details, and updates at growyourwealthpodcast.com. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram. Follow me at Grow Your Wealth Podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or takeaway from today's show. Until next time, remember, burnout is optional. Take care, and I'll see you next week.